Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inspecting History. I'm Julian Gower, and today we are visiting the Jesse James home in St. Joseph, Missouri. This is the house where Jesse James was shot and killed by Bob Ford on April 3rd, 1882. Okay, Jesse James was an outlaw, a bank robber, train robber, a murderer, and a member of the James Younger Gang. He was born on September 5th, 1847, near Kearney, Missouri. His gang was active from 1866 until 1876, when all but Jesse and his brother Frank remained after the Wakefield bank robbery fiasco. Jesse rented this house in 1880 and lived here with his wife Z and their two children, Jesse Jr. and Mary, and it was originally just down the street from here. This is the front parlor, and that is the door that we just saw out front. So the furniture in here is not original, but it is period, and I don't know about you guys, but I am really liking this wallpaper. This room is really small. It's incredibly small. But it was in this room on April 3rd, 1882, where Jesse James with Charlie and Bob Ford were gathered. Jesse had removed his guns and he noticed a crooked picture on the wall, and he stood on a chair to fix it, and that is when Bob Ford shot Jesse James in the back of the head. The bullet entered his right ear and came out over his left eye, leaving that legendary bullet hole. The guy told us that this needle point is original and was the picture that Jesse was actually adjusting when he was shot. His wife rushed in just in time to see Jesse die. Bob stated that the gun accidentally went off, and she is rumored to have muttered, "Yes, I guess it went off on purpose." This house was originally located about 2 blocks north of here, and it was moved in 1939 to the Belt Highway in St. Joseph, Missouri as a tourist attraction. In 1977, the home was donated to the Petit House Museum, and it was moved to where it is today. People have been paying admission since Jesse James died. Today it cost $4, but in 1882 it would have cost you 25 cents, or $6.72 in today's money. So why dig up the body of Jesse James? Well, there are those who believe that Jesse James faked his own death. In 1948, a 100-year-old man named J. Frank Dalton stated that he was the real Jesse James. The conspiracy theories continued until 1994, when the James family requested the exhumation and DNA testing. It's with 99.7% certainty that Jesse James was killed in 1882. And this is what remains of the coffin of Jesse James. So Jesse James was shot in the right lung by Union soldiers near Lexington, Missouri, just after the Civil War. He was trying to surrender. It took him nearly 2 years to recover, and the bullet never left his chest, and they found it during the exhumation. They also found the tie pin that he was buried with, and you can see in those pictures they've got a little red circle indicating where that tie pin would have been. And that would have been the plate that was on Jesse's coffin, and they said that it says "at rest." And I put a picture of the coffin so you can see it. And what you can also see is the viewing glass. So back in the Victorian era, they would do this. They would put the viewing glass over the deceased so you could look at them. And this is what remains of that viewing glass. It's really hard to get a good, clear picture of it because of the glare, so I'm going to have to get really close to it. During the exhumation, they made a plaster cast of Jesse James's skull, and that's what we're looking at right here. And the orange is the projectile of the bullet. So it entered behind his right ear and it came out over his left eye. What no one knew at the time of Jessie's death was that Bob Ford had been in negotiations with Missouri Governor Thomas Crittenden to bring in Jesse James, and there was a $10,000 bounty out for him. When Bob Ford killed Jesse, he immediately wired the governor to claim his reward, but instead of a reward, both Bob and his brother Charlie were charged with first-degree murder. They were indicted, pled guilty, and were sentenced to death by hanging. However, 2 hours later, they were granted a full pardon by the governor. Bob Ford toured the country giving talks on how he killed Jesse James. By 1892, he was running a tent saloon in Creede, Colorado. On June 8th, a man named Edward O'Kelly loaded a double-barrel shotgun, entered the saloon, and said, "Hello, Bob," before shooting Bob Ford in the throat, killing him instantly. Jessie and Z married on April 24th, 1874, and had 2 children who survived to adulthood: Jesse James Jr., who was born in 1875, and Mary Susan, who was born in 1879. Jesse Jr. became a lawyer who practiced in Kansas City and in Los Angeles, California. Unfortunately, James' widow Z died alone and in poverty. Today, Jesse James' descendants live in Missouri and California. Thank you guys for joining me today at the Jesse James home. It is located at the Petit Museum here in St. Joseph, Missouri. And if you like this kind of thing, why don't you hit subscribe, because I post videos like this every Thursday. You never know what's coming up next week.